the right to be heard. This is another one that victims fought for many, many years, and it used to be the rule that courts said that victim impact testimony is not appropriately part of any criminal case. It's not something that the court should be considering at all. It doesn't matter who the victim was or how the victim was affected by the crime. The only question is, did this defendant do this crime? After a Supreme Court case a few decades ago, that rule was changed, and the Supreme Court said not only is it permitted, but in fact it is valuable information, that it is an important consideration for the court to know the impact of this crime on the community, and most particularly on the person who was the victim of the crime. And so now victims have this right to be heard in every jurisdiction in the country. Some of the variations in the different jurisdictions are there limits on when victims have this right to be heard? For instance, only at sentencing or at parole proceedings, detention hearings. When do victims have the right? What they can share when they're providing this statement. I would advise any way that you can plan ahead and notify the court so that the court doesn't plan a very quick sentencing hearing and then there are 12 victims who show up and want to provide victim impact statements. So make sure that everybody is aware of who wants to be heard and how they're going to do that. In some jurisdictions, it's actually required. So for instance, I'm in Maryland, and here in Maryland, the rule is if you haven't notified the court ahead of time, the victim is not going to be allowed to speak. The right to be heard is something that's granted by the judge. And so if the judge says this individual is not a victim, I don't want to hear from them, the judge is allowed to say that. However, there is one option that works in a lot of cases. So judges have tremendous discretion at sentencing hearings to hear about relevant conduct of the defendant. So if you have somebody like that domestic violence victim ex-wife who wants to be heard, you can ask for it under relevant conduct, and generally the court will still allow that person to be heard, which is a great option for people who don't fit the legal definition of victim. Another option is what I have there, that community impact statement. That allows somebody who is a community member to provide an impact statement. Community impact, I think, is a great way for courts to get a better understanding of the full impact of the crime, which again is what they have been charged to assess when they're rendering their sentence.